Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to go over the main slate on Saturday for NBA DFS. Main goal is to help you win some cash. No projections are out just yet, so just kind of going over the slate over each team and just kind of seeing what we should be interested in going into tomorrow's slate. So, without any official news or anything, I mean, what you're going to want to do is head over to our Discord, which you can find linked in this video in the description, and then jump in there and just chat away with us, and we'll talk over news and lineups and everything leading up to lock. But I just think these breakdowns are really helpful. Just kind of get a feel for the slate, so that way when you're kind of formulating your lineups and putting them in your lineup tool and all that stuff, you just have a really good idea of where you want to go. Now, then you run into something like last night or tonight rather, while I'm shooting this is still tonight, where everything looked great. And then all of a sudden, SGA questionable, Cat out, and just like all these random injuries. And like if you played the night slate out of nowhere, Brow was just randomly out. Like none of this news was out at all. So you just have to take the beginning of the day with a grain of salt and just kind of move from there. Anyways, if anything I do here helps you out, please hit the like button. That helps me. And then also subscribe to the channel. That also helps me. And then it gets you alerted to future videos just like this. If you're looking for NFL DFS help, we do have a main slate video up on the channel as well. And you can catch that probably at the end of this video. All right, let's get into it. We're going to just go team by team because we don't have any projections yet, not official news on some players. So we'll just kind of hash it out and see, where it is. So Trae Young, obviously at 10.1K, he is a pretty good price in his last game, 60 fantasy points, 43 real points. We know he's a baller. This wasn't good last time he faced Boston, but I don't really put too much stock in that. The nice thing is he's probable for this game, so he should be active, and he will come in with a pretty good projection. Boston's not a good matchup, and it's on the road, but Boston did play on Friday, so it's worth wondering if they end up sitting some guys. Maybe it'd be a little bit easier matchup for Trae Young. Either way, they're going to need Trae Young to pop off to stay in the game. So I think Trae Young's definitely in play at 10.1. But is he an absolute must? No, not at 10.1 against Boston on the road. Jalen Johnson is, I think, probable. No, he's questionable. He's been out for a while. So he's been out for 14 days, 2 full weeks of missed action. He's been dealing with a shoulder injury. Since it's an upper body injury, I wouldn't be that shocked if he's not like mega limited. But first of all, he's not even officially playing. And then he's like 9K on the road against the Celtics. Maybe not 100%, maybe limited. So he's out for me. I'm not going to go after him. If he doesn't play, then Okongwu looks really good at 4.8K off the bench. He's been getting extra run. Well, not really extra run, but just a lot more usage, a lot more work off the bench. Splitting center minutes with Clint Capella, but he's just been a monster. So 4.8K, I think he is a pretty good value. Regardless of what happens with Jalen Johnson, I think he looks interesting. DeAndre Hunter, in theory, would have more usage without Jalen there. So as a scorer, he could get there, but he's been limited. So he's not going to project super well. And again, not the best matchup in the world. Jackson Daniels at 7.4K, good minutes. He is a stocks kind of guy. He gets steals and blocks, and obviously he's a 3-point shooter too, so he can pay off. Last game without Trae, he had 40 fantasy points. When Trae is there, his stealing is going to be capped. So 7.4K against a solid defensive team on the road like Boston seems a little bit rich. If Trae were to randomly be out again, Daniels would then be a little bit underpriced at 7.4. Bogdanovich was just a bust last time out, 4.8K. I think him not having Trae there probably actually hurt him. He still had good usage. He just did not hit any of his shots. He's going to have good usage no matter what off the bench. And in a big game against Boston like this, I would imagine you play a little bit more. Certainly always a risky guy. It's always risky to play guys off the bench in general. I prefer to use starters if I can. But Bogdanovich is one of those guys that you do consider just because he has a lot of the offense to himself when he comes out on the floor off the bench. At 4.8K, he's fine. I don't have a problem with him. Not necessarily a priority in this spot, though. Vic Krejci has been good. His price comes up, though. He's 27 plus fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. Good minutes. He's been starting. If Jalen Johnson is back, that could impact that. But the fact that their number 1 pick is out may help him a little bit too. I just think at this point, Krejci's price has come up too much. It's not a good matchup. And, now his minutes, we have to consider If Jalen Johnson's back, maybe his minutes won't be quite as good either. But for me, mostly he's just a thin play. Like he needs to hit all his shots to pay off, and now he's 4.7K. When we were really interested in him in the past, he was like 3.2, 3.5, maybe 4K last time. But at this point, I'm not in on Krejci unless excuse me, unless Trey's out again for some reason. But even so, you are pushing the limits there at 4.7. Keaton Wallace balled out last time without Trey. He's not going to be on our radar with Trey back. But if Trey were to randomly be out, we could consider him. But last time he was 3K flat, and he's his salary has rise by 1.5K, so not quite as appealing. David Roddy was okay last time as he was needed. If DeAndre Hunter and both Jalen Johnson were out, maybe he'll get some run at 3.6. We could consider him. Garrison Matthews, not looking at him at 3.3, and just nobody else stands out at this point. Some of these guys are on limits and not healthy and just poorly priced. So overall, I'm avoiding Atlanta. I think Trae Young is an okay stud to pay up for just because he'll be needed. And Okongwu is probably overall my favorite play from the Hawks right now. Okay, so on the Boston side, they did play on Friday. It's very possible one of these guys sits like a graybeard, like Al Horford or Porzingis. You really just never know what they're going to do. Maybe Drew. As things stand, they all look really good. I don't really like targeting the Celtics in general when they're at full strength. So it'll be really interesting to see who sits. But right now, I mean, Tatum is priced just right. The matchup with the Hawks is just amazing. Like, there's nothing to be mad about here. 49 fantasy points. He's been averaging in this matchup in 2 meetings. So that right around the 50 to 55 fantasy point projection range, that's probably where you'll find him, if not more. If the game stays close, he's going to absolutely smash. So I have no problem playing him if he is in. Jaylen Brown's a little bit too cheap at 7.9K. He's been crushing. He only played 1 game against the Hawks, but he crushed. I would not be shocked if he did it again. He's just been too cheap lately. It doesn't have the results yet, obviously, from last night. He's been a little bit quiet lately, like 1 game over 40. I would imagine this is where he gets back on track. So if I'm looking at just price, I think Brown is a little bit more appealing than Tatum right now. But if you're looking at studs, Tatum is definitely one of the better studs right away on the slate. Porzingis at 7.1K. I mean, the matchup is solid. The Hawks are a fast-paced team that don't defend very well. He hasn't played the Hawks yet, but Clint Capella, by the way, he does limit scoring inside a little bit. He's not a bad defender by any means, and he does rebound well. So it's possible it's not really the best matchup for Porzingis specifically, but he's also like a perimeter-based center. Like, he shoots a lot of jump shots and he can make threes and stuff. So I think at 7.1, he's a fine play. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up resting though. Derek White looks like a really good play at 6.3K. He's probably dollar for dollar my favorite Boston play to go after. He's been really bad for fantasy production lately. As you can see in this game log, 14, 21, 7. It's brutal. But it's a really good matchup, and it's a matchup that sets up nicely for him. And in 2 games against them, 47 fantasy points each or per the 2 meetings. So his price has just come way down. He was hovering around like 7 and 7.5 for a while there. So Derek White coming down to 6.3K is very, very appealing. And it's going to be even more interesting because I would not be shocked at all if Drew Holiday sits. Drew Holiday himself, 4.8K, really nice value, just a low floor, low ceiling. He's not really there to produce offensive production and for DFS purposes. He's just a defensive guy who also sets up offense sometimes, and knocks down wide open shots. So, but that said, 4.8K is a little bit too cheap for a starter who plays 30 plus minutes. So I think he's definitely in play as one of the better values right away on this slate. Peyton Pritchard may end up getting a lot more run depending on who sits. Even if he doesn't, it's a really good matchup, and he should get 25 plus minutes off the bench. So he looks like a really good value as well. I don't really have a hard lean between him and Drew. I guess we'll just have to see if Drew sits or not. If Drew is in, then I guess I'd go with Pritchard, to be honest, just because we know he's going to get like a lot of usage in his bench role. Whereas, if the game blows out, who's going to be benched in the 4th quarter? It's going to be Drew and not Pritchard. And if Drew's in there with the starters, obviously, who's getting most of the usage? It's going to be Tatum and Brown, and then Porzingis if he's in there too. So I think they're both good, but I think if I had to pick one, it'd be Pritchard. Horford would look really good at 4.2K if he's in and Porzingis is out. But as it stands, he's just a shot in the dark at 4.2. And then these other guys like Cornette and Hauser, we could start looking at them if Boston does, in fact, rest some guys. And I'll get more into that when we go to like core plays and conversation stuff in Discord. All right, so Philly and Indiana. This will be a solid game to attack. Not quite as inviting as the Hawks game, but it should be fine. So Embiid is out for sure. He's got swelling in his knee, so he's out for like the next week. So obviously, naturally, that's going to make Maxey look really good here at 9.5K. He has excelled in this matchup, and now he's just going to have more usage than, than when Embiid is there. So this is what he's doing when Embiid's not around. 46 to 59 fantasy points. That is a pretty good range, and he can do even more than that. So I like him quite a bit. Dollar for dollar, he is the better stud when compared to Trae Young on this slate. Better matchup, and just as good of usage, and he's cheaper. And I would not be shocked if he has a similar or better projection on this slate. So there's also Paul George at 8.2K. He is questionable. If he's out, Maxey is just going to be through the roof and may end up being a core play even at 9.5K. If Paul George is in, you still can play Maxey because he looks really good still. But Paul George would look really good too at 8.2K. Pretty good matchup for him. Didn't do well the first time he faced the Pacers, but look, he's been crushing as well with no Embiid. It's basically the offense running through those two dudes. So PG-13 is too cheap at 8.2K if he is in. If PG-13 is out, Kelly Oubre looks really good at 5.8K. 45 minutes in his last game, 37 fantasy points. He's got a decent floor and a reasonable ceiling when his role's expanded. He's a knockdown shooter in general. So I think he's a decent lower mid-range play, even if Paul George is in, because he's going to play a lot and get a little bit more usage with no Embiid, plus Caleb Martin is out. So I think Oubre is a fine play in general, but if Paul George is out, Kelly Oubre is inching towards a core play for me. Yabusele is questionable with a knee injury. He played 38 minutes last game. He's been playing monster minutes. Bit erratic as far as production goes, but that's just the way it is. At 5.4K, we will take that gamble with no Embiid. I would definitely prefer Drummond to be out. He's not really been getting safe minutes, but he's also banged up. So he's questionable. If he's in, you'll just have to monitor who starts. If Drummond doesn't start, then Drummond's going to be really tough to trust, and Yabu looks really good then at 5.4K. If Drummond's out, then Yabu looks awesome at 5.4. All these other guys are just total punts that I want nothing to do with. The only guy I would mention is Ricky Council. Well, I'll mention him and Justin Edwards, just because Justin Edwards has been getting a lot of run lately. He even got a lot of run in the second game after the starters came back. This game right here, when he had 41 fantasy points, was when Paul George and Maxey and everybody was just out. But he still got run because he played so well in that game, and he played decently again. So I'd keep an eye on him. 3.3K. And Ricky Council is another guy who's been getting a little bit of action off the bench. He played 35 minutes in that other game. So they're not like safe plays whatsoever. But with Caleb Martin out, if Yabu and or Paul George are also out, then we can consider some of these punts for sure. And there's also the corpse of Eric Gordon at 3.2. I mean, talk about a guy who does nothing but score, and that's all he does. But he would be in the mix there of like Sixers punts that don't feel great, but you can consider them. All right, over the Pacers, they look to be at full strength, which is crazy. The other day, Taylor was all over Siakam and Miles Turner. Miles Turner went ballistic, 44 fantasy points. Siakam had like 50-something, 53. So it's funny because Taylor was like, Siakam doesn't really normally have much of a ceiling, but I think he can get there in this game. And I was like, okay, yeah, maybe. And then sure enough, Taylor was right, 53 fantasy points. So no Embiid, so it's not a matchup to be worried about. Turner looks like the play here for sure. 6K against Yabu? Miles Turner looks really good. There's just nothing really to fear here whatsoever. Even if Drummond is in, it looks good for him. Mathurin is back though after his 1-game suspension. I think Mathurin's okay at 5.9. Nembhard's okay at 5.5. Those guys are kind of like last guys in, unless somebody from Indy sits. Like if Halliburton, he's been like missing or he's been questionable a lot of games. If he's randomly out, then yeah, those guys look really good. Helding himself at 8.3K is a little bit too cheap. By the numbers, the matchup against the Sixers is not that fun, but he's done really well in it. 46 fantasy points per game in it, and we know he can be an assist machine. So even when he's not getting there as a scorer, he can still get like 10 to 15 assists or something and hit. So at that price, I do not mind getting to him whatsoever. And I don't think he's limited either. What did he play? 34 minutes in his first game back from missing a game with an injury. So I have no issue if you want to go there. We'll have to see where the projections lie and what other value opens up and what other studs end up missing. But as things stand, I think Hallie looks like a pretty good stud at that price. And then Turner looks awesome at 6K. His price actually came down from like 6.4. And Siakam's just kind of like in that no man's land. 7.5 is a fine price for him. Like he just showed you what his ceiling was. In the game before that, he had 40 and then 37, 38, 30. Like he's just been rock solid. Are you going to get like a massive ceiling or anything with him? No, not really. I mean, we just saw like about as good as it gets. But I think he's just a fine play. There's nothing wrong with him whatsoever. TJ McConnell, 4.3K off the bench. He'll get maybe 15 and 20 minutes. Good point per minute guy, but I don't know if we need to do that on this slate. And they're at full strength. So they have Neesmith back. They have Shepard. Like they have everybody. So unless somebody's out, I don't think I'll be going beyond Halliburton and Turner probably. All right, really good inviting game is the Warriors hosting the Wizards. Certainly, there is definitely a chance that this game blows out, or a high probability. But it does. It's going to have a really high total, and the Warriors, in particular, are going to have a very high implied team total. So definitely going to want to lean on the Warriors side of this one. But if you're going to play Warriors, you're going to have to consider a run back or two. I said this the other day when we're talking about, or was it yesterday? We're talking about Suns against the Warriors. I said, hey, if you're going to play Devin Booker and or KD, you might want to think about Jordan Poole because he does have a ceiling. And Jordan Poole, actually, he did bottom out. He started hot. Okay, because the game was starting to blow out and then they rallied at the end. So I was ultimately wrong. He only had 34 fantasy points on a 7.5K price tag. But we know this dude has a ceiling. Okay, he's got like all these 40, he's got 51. We know he can ball. So if you think the game is going to stay close, I think Jordan Poole 7.6 is viable. Not a must, but guess what? It is a true revenge game too. If you're into that kind of thing, he is going back to Golden State and gets to face them. Last time we faced him earlier this year in DC, 44 fantasy points. So he's appearing to be vengeful. I don't want to base everything on a revenge narrative, but I think his price is okay. And if you are going to play Warriors, I think running it back with Poole isn't the worst thing to do. There's also Kuzma at 6.3, pretty cheap, 35 minutes 2 games ago. He only played 27 minutes last game. So, I mean, not great that we can't really trust his minutes from game to game. But, this 42 fantasy point outing right here is kind of showing you what he's capable of doing. So 6.3K, he's a solid run back here for sure. Alexander Sarr, kind of capped with his minutes, but we know he's very, very productive. Very good point per minute guy, 36, 33 in his last 2 games. He could definitely feast on the Warriors in here down low for sure. And he's a decent price. I don't love the minutes cap is the only thing I have issue with when it comes to Sarr. Cool Ball at 5.5K is just okay. Good minutes, but the production has not really been that great lately. I don't mind it, but if I'm going to go to a Wizard, it's probably going to be Poole or Kuz. I think Kuz is the easiest to get to. The easiest to get to, and that feels like the floor is decent and there's also a ceiling. And the Poole just feels like it's almost a reach to get there. Because there's going to be other guys that are more interesting. Like, yeah, Poole's fine, but wouldn't you rather go to like Paul George if he plays or Halliburton for just a little bit more? I think I would. So definitely a decent run back, but I think right now if I was going to play a run back, it would probably be Kuz, and then I'd also maybe look at Koulibaly. But like I said, Poole's definitely in play just because he does have a ceiling. Bob Carrington at 4.5K is a good value. 26 minutes last game. He usually plays a good amount of minutes, and he can get you anywhere between 20 and 30 fantasy points. So I think he's an okay try if you're looking for value on this slate. I think we missed the Jared Butler train because the Wizards, besides Malcolm Brogdon, are pretty healthy. But if you think this game's going to blow out, you could take a shot on Jared Butler at 3.7K. Not sure I feel super good about it, but you just never know. Is Keyshawn George still in the rotation? Yep, he's getting anywhere from 20 to 31 minutes. Crushed last game. He's not really that good of a player, but he hit like all the shots. So, and he fouled out in 31 minutes. So he is just a do-it-all guy. So at 3.6, you can try him. But do I feel good about it? No, because Lightning struck in that game, and I don't know if it's going to do it again. So the cool thing with the Warriors is they have a lot of bodies out. So not only is this a really good spot for the Warriors, but it's also a pretty good spot for Warriors value. And those guys being out might make this game stay close. So Steph Curry looks awesome at 8.8K. He's going to project extremely well. And if this game stays close, he had 37 fantasy points in 24 minutes last time against the Wizards. So if this game stays close, he's going to have a shot at like 60 fantasy points. No Kuminga, no Kyle Anderson, no Podziemski. Draymond Green is probable, but he's been sick. So certainly possible he misses or is limited. Whether he's in or not, he doesn't really cut into Curry's, offensive usage that much. Obviously, he can cut into the playmaking a little bit, but he's not going to stop Curry from blasting off as a scorer. So Curry looks awesome. Curry's a little bit too cheap for this spot, all things considered. Andrew Wiggins looks pretty good at 5.8. Playing really good minutes lately, getting it done. I like him quite a bit in this spot. He feels a little bit too cheap for facing the Wizards. I do think the return of Draymond Green lowers his ceiling, but he looks like a really good play. TJD looks really good here. Minutes are pretty stable. 26 to 30 is probably what you should expect. And against the Warriors, who do not rebound well and don't stop anybody in any regard, he looks like a smash play. He looks awesome. There's also Dennis Schroeder at 5.3K. He's not like really exploded that much with the Warriors. He's just kind of like deferring a lot and just taking like what's there, just taking what's given to him. It's led to a reasonably efficient presence for Golden State, but not really a fun one for DFS. That said, 5.3K against the Warriors or Wizards, I think that's certainly worth considering. It's a decent low mid-range option. Buddy Hield's been starting and getting run. Draymond Green returning might change that, so keep an eye on that. But I think Buddy Hield will still be in the rotation at 4.7, and he's been playing really well. You can certainly consider him. I don't think he's a super safe play, but with no Kyle and also Podziemski still being out and no Kuminga, I think the minutes should be somewhat stable. And then there's these other punts down here like Moses Moody, Lindy Waters III. They'll all get a little bit of run, but they are all very, very thin, and I just wouldn't do that. Guy Santos has been actually getting a good amount of run. He's been producing decently too. 3K flat, not the worst punt in the world if we feel good about him keeping those minutes with Dre returning, but very risky and in general kind of thin. But that game in general feels really stackable and really fun. Like I think that's a really interesting one. I do not think it'll go overlooked, so I think you'll have to find a way to get different in other ways for sure. All right, over to the Cavs and Timberwolves. Timberwolves played on Friday. Cleveland played on Thursday and got absolutely waxed by the Thunder, as one would expect. This is not a good matchup either on the road against the Timberwolves. It'll be interesting to see if Minnesota rests anybody, but don't really see why they would. Maybe Mike Conley because he started last night. But then again, he didn't play the fourth quarter, so perhaps that was his rest, right? Evan Mobley is questionable with a calf issue. He was horrible against OKC, only played 18 minutes in the blowout, and obviously he's got the injury here. If he's in and healthy, I think he's fine. 8.5K, his price has come up a little bit to the point where I don't think he's a priority, though. He's the most expensive Cav, and that's going to probably rule him out of my pool. I hate to say that because he is a good player, but it's not really a good matchup. He's not healthy, and he's suddenly a little bit too expensive. Let me get a drink of water real quick. So if you want to play him, I think he'll be a good tourney option. Good for GPP. He's low owned because just nothing really about the situation makes him stand out. Instead, you have Donovan Mitchell, who's a little bit too cheap. Matchup by the numbers is not great. He's had a remarkably low floor, and we know, like at the same time, we know he has a ceiling. Donovan Mitchell can pop off for like 50 real points. He had 55 fantasy points 2 games ago. But look at, I don't want to be a game log watcher, but 16, 28, 25, 29, 28. Like they just play team basketball, and when they're healthy, just all their dudes eat a little bit, and they just win, So Mitchell is the ultimate GPP play because he's not going to be owned because nobody wants to pay for Donovan Mitchell when he's just tank mode, just not doing anything, and just like scoring 20 points and like getting a couple rebounds and a few assists. Like he's just there. But when he does stuff like this, when he's going bananas, shooting 20 plus shots, he can go off. So It's not really the spot that I want to target Donovan Mitchell or really any of the Cavs, but there could be a mentality aspect here to go after. Whereas, like, the Cavs just got obliterated by OKC, and maybe they want to come out and prove a point. Like, okay, we got taken, but we're gonna go, do the same thing to Minnesota now. So there could be something like that. That said, if Mobley's in, nobody here really stands out. I think the only one that would is gonna be Jarrett Allen at 6.6K. He's one of the only guys who actually played well in that game. If the game was stayed close, he probably was smashed. 6 for 6, 13 and 7, 20 fantasy points in 16 minutes. So, and he goes up against Rudy Gobert, so he'll need to be out there. They need his size to contend with Rudy. And Rudy is pretty overrated at this point in his career. So I think Jared at 6.6 is the best dollar for dollar play for the Cavs. And the second one's going to be Garland, just because he kind of just does more than Mitchell. He does not have the overall ceiling that Mitchell provides, but he has a better floor because he's going to be more of a playmaker. He can also hit threes. He can also score a lot of points and get steals. Like, he does it just as much as Mitchell does, but a considerable amount more on a consistent basis. So I think they're both okay plays, but I'm going to take the $800 savings if I'm going to play either of the guards, and I'd go Garland. Karis LeVert, good usage rate and decent permanent guy off the bench, anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes can be expected, and I think that's enough to take a shot at 4.2. That's not a problem for me. Max Strus is going to play 20 to 25 minutes, should start, but they've been kind of yanking him in and out with Dean Wade. He's just going to play based off of whether he's hitting his shots. So he's a thin play, but at 3.9K, you can take a chance on that. Just because he's not going to be I wouldn't imagine he's going to be that owned, but it's only a 5-game slate, and there's not a ton of like super obvious value right now. So it's possible he could garner a little bit of ownership ultimately. But he looks viable, albeit thin. I have a little bit more interest in LeVert just because I know LeVert is going to be doing more than just shooting jump shots when he's out there. He just has better usage rate. And he's only $300 more. So it'll be interesting to see what the ownership is. Overall, not super excited about the Cavs, but if Evan Mobley is out, that would open things up considerably. And then Mitchell, Garland, and Allen would look a lot better. As things stand, though, I would go Allen first and then Garland second. Minnesota, they're at home. They played last night. Anthony Edwards went ballistic, crushed in Madison Square Garden against the Knicks, and the Wolves won. So they should be feeling pretty good. Julius Randle did not have a good game, but he is still only 7.2K. I don't mind him. He's just not a priority. The price is good. He's a talented player. He does a lot of different things, but this is forever and always the Anthony Edwards show. He just went off, though, so I would not be shocked at all if Edwards came back down a little bit, especially since a matchup with the Cavs is less than ideal. He's capable of smoking anybody. He averages almost 26 points a game. He's going to project pretty decently, even though he's facing the Cavs, but it's just not really a good spot. This game in general just doesn't feel like a game I want a lot of shares of. A lot of star power, a lot of upside, just a lot of low floors, and just not excuse me, not a lot of really palatable matchups. Dante DiVincenzo remains out. It's not official that he's out for this game, so keep an eye on that. If he's back, his price has come back down. He showed an immense ceiling, 57 fantasy points, 54. And, he does have a low floor, but he's going to play at least 29 minutes as the starter if he's in. So 5.3K, I would be very interested in him, even in a tough spot, just because we know he's going to have decent usage. He's a good per minute guy. And, he'd be a good bet to play a reasonable amount of minutes. And he's displayed really a good ceiling. So the matchup is not going to be great. But at 5.3K, he would definitely be on my radar, and a borderline core play. We'll see how it all shakes out. I don't really want to commit to core plays this early, but he would be on my radar. Rudy Gobert, just because he's going to be needed against Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley if he's in. I think he's a fair value at 5.2K. He's not exhibiting much of a ceiling. But when he's needed, like we knew, the Wizards do not rebound well or stop anybody down low, so he was decent. With 33 fantasy points, about a point per minute there. Against the Pels, against Messi, he had 41 fantasy points. Like, when he's going to be out there, we can consider him more. And we know the that the Wolves need him in this game. So at 5.2K, I think we could certainly try him there. Naz Reid's a little bit more appealing though, just because he's coming off the bench. He doesn't really have to contend with Mobley and Jarrett Allen all the time like Rudy does. And he's a really good per minute guy with a high usage rate. So Naz Reid's probably my preference because his price just never goes up, by the way. But they both look decent. Both look like solid values. Jaden McDaniels, 4.2K, gets a lot of minutes. Needs to hit his shots to pan out. If he doesn't, he's looking at 15 fantasy points or something like that. Very low floor. Not a super high ceiling, but if he hits his shots, he can really make it happen at 4.2K. Not going to be in on Conley at 3.4 unless he starts again. Even if he does, like apparently he's only going to play 20 minutes no matter what, because that's what happened tonight. And that was really annoying. So just have to see what happens there. If Dante DiVincenzo is in, we will be rescued from a Mike Conley decision. If DiVincenzo is out, Conley's in play. But will be risky for sure because it's not a good matchup. He's old. He hasn't really been good. And apparently they don't want him to play more than 20 minutes. There's also Na, who was a bust on Friday, but he is capable of popping off as a scorer, and he should play about 20 minutes off the bench. If no Dante, he's going to potentially play a lot more than that, maybe even get the start. So at 3.2K, he would definitely be a value play we're looking at. All right, last game of the night, we have Houston against Portland. Awesome matchup for the Rockets. Still no Jabari Smith. Tari Eason returned in the last game. How much did he play? 24 minutes in his first game back after missing a month. Wow, that is surprising. Okay, so if that's the case, we can certainly look at Tari Eason at 5.3K because he's a really good per minute guy. And the matchup with the Blazers is fantastic. So, yeah, I don't have an issue with him whatsoever. His return obviously cuts into Cam Whitmore. So Cam Whitmore did not play a ton in that game at 23, so they kind of like split it. I mean, if we can trust that the minutes are going to stay there, 4K Cam sounds better. He's also a good per minute guy. He's been playing really well. He's been playing a little bit too well for them to not let him stay in the rotation too. So it's going to be a tough call. I think the 1.3K price gap has me leaning towards Whitmore if we can feel good about those minutes. And with no Jabari Smith still there, Jabari Smith is still out. I think that we can be reasonably confident that that's the case. But both those guys are in play and look like good values. I think it just leaned towards Cam at this point. Dylan Brooks could he could lose some minutes here because Tari is back and Whitmore's been playing well. So I wouldn't be super shocked if his role becomes increasingly a little less stable. That said, he's still a good defender. He can still hit threes. And for the moment, he's still playing like about 35 minutes when the game stays close. Don't really expect this game to stay close because Portland is horrendous. But if it does, he's in play at 4.9K. I do not hate him as a value. Probably a little bit safer than Tari, but Tari has a better ceiling. So you can pick which one of those you feel more compelled to to go with. All right, so up top, I don't know why I went in reverse and went value first, but up top we have Fred VanVleet back. He missed. Well, that's actually worth mentioning. Those guys, Cam Whitmore and Tari Eason, might have gotten a little bit more burn because Fred VanVleet sat in that last game too. So it's very possible that Dylan and or Cam end up losing run here because FVV is back and Tari is going to be back in his second game. So I would monitor that and really just consider and weigh your options there because that is definitely, I almost forgot about that. Yeah, Fred VanVleet missed the last game. So Fred VanVleet's back, 7.8K against the Blazers. That feels a little bit expensive. He's usually priced like 7.3, 7.1, 7.2. The matchup's really good, so that's probably why his price went up. But if people are going to pay for Fred VanVleet, I would much rather get Jalen Green, who is on a heater right now. 42 plus fantasy points in each of his last 6 games. And he's playing a Blazers team that is not good defensively. So the price has come way up. It's 7.7 now. I don't think Jalen Green is the core play he's been for a while. But if nobody's going to play Jalen Green, I will definitely consider him still at 7.7K. Because, I mean, he could still play into the fourth quarter even if the game is getting out of hand. Like, I wouldn't be that shocked. So I like him. I like him still at 7.7. Certainly like him more than Fred VanVleet. I think Fred VanVleet's okay. I think he's in play. But Jalen Green just looks a lot better to me. Has more of a ceiling. Ahmed Thompson, 8.4K. He was really good against the Kings, 46 fantasy points. He just does a lot when he's out there, and he plays a ton of minutes. The return of Tari Eason did nothing to his minutes, 41 minutes against the Kings, double-double. This one game was weird, no assists. He always gets at least like 3 to 5 assists, and he had none in that game. But he's super, super safe play. His price has come way up at 8.4K, but he does have a really nice floor, really nice ceiling, and he's just really coming into his own. Not a priority at that price because we're going to have other options potentially like PG-13 or Tyrese Halliburton. I mean, Steph Curry's only $400 more. So on this slate, I do think it's likely that Green and Thompson, despite the really good matchup, because of the prices and other options, they are going to end up being a little bit overlooked. And that's going to get me interested in them for sure. So if they are overlooked, definitely on my radar. If they're like chalky for some reason in a potential blowout, like then I'm going to be a lot less interested. Şengün at 9.1K. I mean, he's just forever too cheap. He looks really good here. 50 fantasy points against the Kings, 46 the game before that, 59 against Memphis, 51 against Washington. He's just a beast. In 2 games against Portland, he's been pretty subpar. I mean, DeAndre Ayton can be a bit of a problem as a defender down low, but I'm not that worried about that. He's often like disinterested. It's just like at this point, Jalen Green and Ahmed Thompson are just blowing up to the point where like Şengün isn't always going to be needed. But Şengün is a monster. He can get triple double. He can just go nuts. So I think at 9.1K, he's one of the more compelling studs on the slate because this is a slate that is absent like a Giannis or a Jokic, so like Şengün kind of stands out here. And if the ownership does flock to Amen or Jalen Green, you also can consider Şengün if he goes a little bit overlooked. Ending with Portland, I mean, all you need to look at is the salaries here because nobody's priced over 7K because these guys aren't good. But they do offer value because there's a lot of usage here. Scoot Henderson's too cheap at 6K still. He's been good, 59 and 29 fantasy points. Obviously, those are two very different outcomes, but he's been good. He's a good point per dollar guy here. And he's going to have a lot of usage as he stays in the starting lineup, most likely. Denny Avdia is doubtful for this game, so we can just ignore him. Jeremy Grant he's been upgraded to questionable, so he could be back here. That could be a problem for Tumani Kamara. It could be a problem for Scoot Henderson. But I wouldn't be shocked if Jeremy Grant is slowly brought back into things, and especially since he's been out for like a month. Well, a little over 2 weeks. He's just been out long enough with his face issue that I would not be surprised if he comes off the bench and is limited in his first game. But if he starts it, or we hear he's not limited, 5.2K is a pretty decent price there. I think I'm with Jeremy Grant probably back. I'm a lot less interested in Tumani Kamara. He has been pretty good in general. Lately, he has not been good, but he was having a lot of good games, a lot of big minutes. But if we can't bank on his minutes, like I think he was more of a minutes play for a while there when he was like in the 4.2, 4.5K range. If he's not actually going to have big minutes and he's like getting more expensive, then I'm not really that interested. So with no Denny, though, there is usage to go around. So Anthony Simons at 6.7K, that's a decent price. Shadon Sharp at 6.3K, that's a really good price. He was chalky last time and busted with 24, but that wouldn't stop me from going back to him again. Decent usage guy, good per minute guy. They're going to need him if this game is going to stay close. So at 6.3K, I do have interest in him for sure. I think the first 2 guys that stand out would be him and Scoot, but due to the prices, I'm assuming they're going to be relatively owned on this slate again. So Simons honestly stands out as a turning play. Another big reason he has been horrendous. 3 for his last 21, 0 points last game, 0 for 9. Like, I know that doesn't sound good. You don't really want to go race to go play that guy at 6.7K, but he also has been like awesome before that happened. Like he was on fire and now he went ice cold. So he's not going to be owned at all, I don't think. I think if anybody's going to play Blazers, they're going to play Sharp, maybe Ayton, and Scoot. Simons is a really, really interesting tournament play. Like nothing actually adds up to make that like look or feel good. But if nobody's going to be on him, I think the price is still palatable enough that he is a little bit interesting to close out the night with. Donovan Clingan remains out, so Robert Williams the Time Lord. He got 18 minutes in his last game. He's a really good per minute guy. He's risky, but that's only 3.2K, and especially in a game that could blow out, I think he is a pretty interesting punt. Another interesting punt would be Delano Banton. We were all over him as a 3K min punt, and he had 31 fantasy points. I didn't use him enough. I got stuck on Tumani Kamara because I thought he was safer with his minutes. Banton was the play. So he could do that again. Certainly, this game is going to have a thick spread. I mean, I would not be shocked at all if it is a blowout. So Robert Williams and Banton are definitely guys I will be having on my radar. All right, that's going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you out. Just going through all the plays to kind of like map out the scenarios and stuff. Obviously, injuries can throw everything out the window and change things, but we will have core plays in our Discord as we get closer to lock, and we'll update as best we can, and just come in there and have conversations with everybody, talk strategy, share your lineups that you plan on using or any ideas how you're going to attack the slate, and we'll help you the best we can. If we do help you at all, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, even consider donating with a super thanks below the video, and of course, come into the Discord, and let's all work together to get a big win. Thanks for watching, and good luck.